Okay, good morning everyone, and welcome to the final event in our webinar series, An Introduction to Food and Beverage Sustainable Packaging. As is always the case, we've got a few people joining, so bear with us while we admit them. So the webinar series has been brought to you by the Food Industry Innovation and Food and Beverage Fund teams of the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development. I'm Kim Antonio and I manage the Food Industry Innovation Program. Prior to the commencement of the webinar, I'd like to conduct an acknowledgement of country. The Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country, the Aboriginal people of the many lands we work on, and their language groups throughout Western Australia, and recognise their continuing connection to the land and the waters. DPIRD respects the continuing culture of Aboriginal people and the contribution they make to the life of our regions. And we pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging. And as someone working in the food industry, really happy to see the emergence of both Indigenous owned and managed food production businesses, and also the increased use of native botanicals in many West Australian food products as a point of differentiation. So over the last 6 weeks, the webinar series has focused on sustainable packaging, and the focus has really been around providing that broad and general introduction to sustainable packaging design to set the scene for you and introduce you to the key organisations and contacts that can help you with your journey. I won't go through all the topics because those who attended each week are familiar with them, but the webinar series has been recorded and each of the 6 webinars is available for you to view, and Amelia will pop the link into the chat. The program was really designed as a short 30-minute weekly session, so really based on the feedback from businesses, something they could attend and then get on with their busy workday. The format, however, didn't really allow for us to have Q&A during each of the webinars, so we asked that people submit their questions either via chat or via email, and today we're actually going to go through those questions and the responses that have been provided both by the team members that you'll meet today, but also by the presenters that we've had throughout the series, including those from AIP and APCO. Following the Q&A, Brett Henderson from AusIndustry will explain what they're working on in the sustainable packaging space. And we've had a wonderful relationship with AusIndustry over the last 5 years, many joint initiatives together, and we're excited to hear what AusIndustry are doing. And I'm sure there will be further opportunities for collaboration with AusIndustry on this topic as the year plays out. So, guys, if I can ask you to pop your screens up in terms of our team and Brett, and I'll start by introducing Brett. So Brett has extensive industry and government experience, having held senior roles in organisations such as AXA Australia, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Austrade, and the Department of State Development and Business Innovation in Victoria. Brett's been with AusIndustry since 2016, where he has shaped and led projects for the Entrepreneurs Program. And I know many of our business participants have been Entrepreneur Program participants, and we've had that excellent relationship over recent years with many of our projects really dovetailing together and working successfully together. So really happy to have you join us, Brett. I noticed you'd popped in on a few of the previous webinars. Great to have you supporting Western Australia as you always do, and look forward to hearing from you later in the webinar.
Thanks, Kim.
So I'd also like to introduce our team that have been behind the webinar series, and I'll start with Phil May. Phil, if you pop your hand up for the pretty easy for them to know who you are. So Phil's been with the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development in 2 stints now, working with the Food Industry Innovation team. He has 35 years of wine sector experience, and he's experienced in growing, making, packaging and selling wine, and significant international wine selling experience. Phil's been the instigator of a couple of our key projects, and one of them, the Sustainable Packaging Project, and also the Food Waste Project that Phil presented in Webinar 1. So thanks, Phil, for all your work on this series, and great to have you joining us today.
Thanks, Kim.
I'd also like to introduce Monica Hobbs. Monica is a project officer with the food integrity team at DPIRD. And Monica is a food technologist with 15 years experience in the private sector food quality assurance and product development space. She's currently working on food waste and sustainable packaging initiatives. We had the pleasure last week, Monica, of visiting one of your ex-employers for a tour. We're just a little concerned at the end that they were trying to get her back, so we had to rush her back to the office. But great to see how well respected you were there, Monica, and so you did a great job when you were with Sonia.
Thanks, Kim.
I'd also like to introduce Greta Magistrelli, who's a project officer in the Food and Beverage Fund team at DPIRD. And Greta's been working in food and environmental sustainability, both in the private and public sector prior to joining DPIRD. And she managed projects related to reduction in food waste, capability programs, and sustainable procurement projects.
Thanks, Kim.
No worries. And finally, Amelia, you probably all know Amelia. She's been with DPIRD for quite a while, since 2000. And when did you join, Amelia?
2008.
2008. And I've had the great pleasure of having Amelia as part of my team since the inception of the Food Industry Innovation Project back in 2015. She currently manages the food and beverage capability guides. She's been working on sustainable packaging initiatives, and she drives our communication with industry. So thanks for joining us as well this morning, Amelia.
Thanks, Kim.
So the team will be answering the questions. I'll present the questions that the participants have asked throughout the series, and the team members will respond to those, bearing in mind, as we said earlier, that we've referred the questions also to the panel members that we've had throughout the series. So the panel members from AIP and APCO and others, and Curtin, of course, have provided some of the answers as we go through the questions. Okay, so question 1. Where can I find information about sustainable packaging suppliers in Western Australia? And I'll pass this one to you, Monica.
Thanks, Kim. So a list of sustainable packaging suppliers is available in the Food and Beverage Professional Service Directory on the AGRIC website. Once you click on the link, search in the packaging section and search for sustainable packaging. The focus for this section of the directory has been on sustainable packaging suppliers of primary packaging for food and beverage manufacturers. So under each business listed is a brief description of the primary packaging solutions, contact details, and a link to their website so you can further investigate the solutions available. So this sustainable packaging section of the directory is still very much in the development stage, with only a few businesses listed, so more will be added as information is received. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Monica. Our second question is related to the first one in some ways. Where do I go for help to optimise sustainable packaging communications on my brand? Greta, would you like to respond to this one?
Yes, thanks, Kim. So you are encouraged to review the service providers listed in the Food and Beverage Professional Service Provider directory that Monica just referenced. And also, additionally, following the Sustainable Packaging Branding presentation by Associate Professor Min T from Curtin University, Min invited webinar attendees to also contact her to discuss sustainable branding messages, and her details are now on the screen.
Thanks, Greta. Question 3. What logos should we use to communicate recycling messages? Amelia, would you like to respond to this one?
Thanks, Kim. So APCO recommends and the AIP endorse the use of one system and one system only, that being the Australian Recycling logo, or the ARL. So the current slide up on your screen is an overview of the various components of the Australian Recycling logo and what these 3 core symbols mean. The ARL system communicates to consumers which bin each packaging component should be placed in for appropriate recycling. The triangular arrow image is referred to as a Mobius loop and is used on packaging components that can be fully recycled or conditionally recycled. When the arrows of the Mobius loop on a packaging item are solid, such as the arrows referring to how to dispose of a box on this current slide, the packaging item can be placed in curbside recycling as it is made from compliant recycling materials. Such packaging is being increasingly adopted by food and beverage manufacturers, which is great to see. When the arrows of the Mobius loop are not solid, such as in the middle symbol, the packaging materials can be recycled only if the instructions below the symbol are followed. Otherwise, these items are not recyclable. Where packaging displays the ARL symbol of a rubbish bin, this packaging cannot be placed in recycling bins at all. So despite its ubiquity, the Mobius loop can be confusing for even the most savvy of consumers. And as such, it's important for businesses using these logos to do all that they can to help demystify its meaning and ensure their customers understand what to do with their packaging once it's served its purpose. Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, Amelia. And look, from personal experience, the logos can be demystified by a 6-year-old because I've, over the last 12 months, received quite specific instructions about what I need to recycle and how from my 6-year-old. So she was more up to speed on the topic than me when we kicked this webinar series off. Okay. Our next question is, can recyclable packaging be used for food packaging? We'll go to our food packaging expert, Monica.
Okay, thanks, Kim. So the answer to this question is quite complex, but most importantly, food safety is not something that is negotiable. It is possible to recycle soft plastics in materials suitable for use in some food products. The soft plastics, such as those we return to the red cycle bins at the supermarket, can be chemically broken down to oil, cleaned and repolymerized back into plastic that becomes 100% recycled, clean and food safe. So Nestle are using such a technique for the packaging of some of their Australian Kit Kat products, as you can see on screen. The Nestle Australia CEO, Sandra Martinez, has said that there is a pathway to solve the soft plastics problem and that manufacturers like Nestle will have a key role in driving demand for food-grade recycled soft plastic packaging and creating market conditions that will ensure all stakeholders in the value chain use soft plastics as a resource and not as waste. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Monica. Okay, question 5 related to one of the slides in Professor Mintee's Sustainable Packaging and Branding presentation in week 3. And the question was, how effective is this messaging with customers? Amelia, could you respond to that, please?
Certainly, Kim. So Min has provided the following in response to this question. While further consumer insights are required, preliminary findings showed branding such as this met consumer expectations by 1. Displaying the product. In this case, expectations are for leafy greens to be packed in a manner that retains the look of freshness while keeping the product fresh for as long as possible. 2. Making sure the packaging is functional and easy to use by making it resealable so that consumers don't need to repack unused product into another package, therefore reducing waste. And 3, this packaging was designed for a purpose, to encourage and enable consumers to be more sustainable. So therefore, the example provided is considered effective in its messaging. Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, Amelia. So our next question came through the series. It related to the Sainsbury's commitment to removing plastic packaging from fresh produce and an announcement that they've made on that topic. And the related question, I guess, for Australian audience was, is packaging in the fresh produce aisle coming to an end? Greta, would you like to respond to this question?
For sure. Thanks, Kim. So while Australian supermarkets continue to offer consumers convenient packaging options, the landscape is changing very quickly. If we look at what is happening on the global stage, it is possible to identify supermarket chains, cities, and even countries that have already incorporated strategies such as nil packaging within produce aisles. For instance, a new French law banning the use of plastic packaging for the sale of fruit and vegetables took effect in January 2022. And this measure is expected to eliminate more than 1 billion wrappings a year. And many consumer packaged goods businesses have welcomed France's commitment, and we can expect, we can expect more countries and organizations to transition to sustainable solutions.
Thank you, Greta. Question 7, where can I find out more information about the services that APCO provides? Monica, please, could you respond to that?
Thanks, Kim. The best place to start is to visit the APCO website. So Leslie Fox from APCO, who presented in week 5, also encouraged those interested to contact the APCO Member Services team for more information. So resources available include sustainable packaging guidelines, case studies, and further information around the 2025 packaging targets. Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, Monica. Question 8, this was from one of our startups. I'm starting off on my sustainable packaging journey. What is the first thing I should do? Amelia.
Well, you've already made the first step by choosing to reconsider your packaging. A good way to get started is to conduct an audit of your primary, secondary, and tertiary packaging. Have an honest look at what packaging is coming in and what is going out of your business. Look at what materials are going into your waste bins each week and what you are sending to market, what's going to landfill, and what's going to recycling. We're going to address more questions regarding audits, such as a packaging life cycle assessment shortly. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you. This question came from one of our distilleries. What can I use as a sustainable option to the BioCup clear tumblers? Greta, could you respond to this, please?
Thanks, Kim. So even though food service packaging was not something that was addressed during the webinar series, please note that the National Retailers Association information on the WA plastic bans indicates the following. WA Round 1 ban. The proposed ban on disposable plastic cups and lids for cold drinks is to be enforceable by the 1st of July 2022. The ban includes all forms of cold cups, including flutes, goblets, beer cups, etc. This ban allows only AU-certified PLA-lined paperboard cups and PLA lids to be used as an option. Therefore, no transferred cups will be able to be used. Also, please note that the regulations for cups will not be enforced until the 1st of October to enable the run out of stocks. So, based on this legislation, the use of other types of clear cups is not an option for single-use disposable cups. And also for your information moving ahead, other food service related items that will be permitted for use include cups and bowls. So washable and reusable cups that are made from glass, stainless steel, ceramics, silicone, bamboo, or heavier plastics. Single-use disposable options such as, but not limited to, lined paperboard certified as biodegradable will also be acceptable. Thanks, Kim.
Thanks. Okay. Our next question was, what do we do with our packaging waste that we accumulate? Monica.
Thanks, Kim. So contact your current waste contractor and seek their direction. In case you aren't aware, the Food and Beverage Professional Service Directory that I mentioned earlier has a waste collection category, so you can check that out. It is important to note that there can be a considerable variation between waste removal services, between towns and between regions. Should your inquiry to your existing contractor not attain an outcome aligned with your expectation, don't hesitate to reach out to another contractor. This question also crosses into the benefits from conducting a life cycle assessment plan, which we will refer to in the next question. Thanks, Kim.
Great. Thanks, Monica. Should we consider a shift to using paper packaging as a substitute for plastic? Amelia.
Okay, so you need to look at conducting a life cycle assessment or an LCA to determine whether paper is in fact a more sustainable option for your product. LCA methodology evaluates environmental impacts over the life cycle of a product from mineral extraction through to materials processing, manufacture, distribution, product use to end of life. To optimise circular and sustainable design packaging, technologists need to look at the potential environmental impacts of the product across its lifetime. Do the research to ensure a paper option has an equal or lower environmental impact to your existing plastic option. We cannot just assume that paper packaging is the most suitable option. The most sustainable option. An LCA map will help qualify which of the suitable and available packaging options has the lowest environmental impact. Another important consideration is legislation. As business owners and managers, we need to be aware of existing packaging legislation as well as any forthcoming legislative changes. Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, Amelia. Is it possible to conduct a life cycle assessment without software, and are there businesses offering to undertake contract life cycle assessments? Monica?
Thanks, Kim. There are many options available to those considering undertaking a life cycle assessment. LCAs can be streamlined and you don't necessarily have to undertake a full LCA. There are a number of tools available and it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. An extensive LCA is remarkably expensive but valuable for certain purposes. There are more streamlined life cycle assessments that can be undertaken within smaller operations, and there are also mapping exercises that can be undertaken without software. So there is a good article on the Australian Institute of Packaging's website describing LCA options and how this can guide you in your packaging design. So please reach out to the AIP if you would like to discuss this further. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Monica. And what about stickers and labelling in regards to sustainable packaging? Greta?
Thanks, Kim. Label technology is advancing at speed. The Australian Institute of Packaging invites those interested in knowing more about labels to contact them directly. Stocks, glue, inks, closed-loop programs to collect the skeletal material from the label stock, the reprocessing of some of the waste into washable glue are constantly evolving to the point where there are now many sustainable options available. An objective of sustainable packaging is to offer easy to separate packaging components. The easier it is to separate the packaging components, for instance, the easier it is to separate labels from a glass bottle or jar, the lower the costs associated with reuse and recycling the components, and the more consumers will embrace the sustainable packaging initiatives. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Greta. And our final question was a more domestic waste question than necessarily business waste question. It said, I'm disappointed with the lack of domestic waste services available, particularly in matters related to food waste and other recyclable products. What more can be done? I guess I'll respond to this one. So from a government perspective, there are really two levers to driving change, and recycling and waste reduction are no different. There's the provision of incentives and there's enforcement and penalty. To be truthful, the focus of our webinar series has been to target businesses that proactively want to make change because they believe it's the right thing to do and because they understand it's necessary to be in front of the curve to maintain competitiveness. And many of the businesses that I've spoken to in this space just recognise that it's going to be a necessity for doing business going forward. So we deliberately didn't focus the series on the legislative change and the implications from an enforcement perspective, but more around the target audience and what they told us they were interested in, which was proactive change and how to be ahead of the curve. With that context, I'd suggest that the people that are involved in this are probably more interested in kind of the early adoption, and an issue that regularly comes up for early adopters is the lack of availability of appropriate recycling infrastructure for those that are making proactive change. And we've had a number of cases of that already with people going down a path, and we referred to it in a previous question around paper, making a proactive change or investigating a proactive change to look at replacing plastic with paper, and then finding out that there were limited recycling options available for them. We know that the volume of material that's available for recycling drives the commercial viability of recycling infrastructure. So, as I guess with that in mind, proactive household domestic recycling will play an important role in driving the volumes that are required in Western Australia to underpin investment in recycling infrastructure. We've seen how consumer demand is driving change both in supermarket practices and their current promotions, and we've also seen some positive change with the adoption of the FOGO bin program in some local governments and municipalities here in WA. I guess I'd conclude by saying that we've all got the ability to make a change in both our business and home recycling practices, but as interested parties who have some information at our disposal, I think we've also got an opportunity to educate others and to voice what we expect in the recycling space, what we expect from our representatives, both at a local government, state government and Commonwealth levels. So my challenge to you, I guess, is to play a proactive role in that space. And we did hear, I think it was in the very first webinar from Pierre Pinard saying, look, we can all, we all make a change, we can all make a difference. Effectively, it starts with us. It's a little bit of a long-winded answer to the question, but I do think, we can all proactively drive change in this space. Well, that actually concludes our questions that were submitted from businesses throughout the webinar series. Okay, so I briefly introduced Brett at the start of the webinar. Been great to have you with us, Brett, and would love to hear a little from you about what AusIndustry is doing in the sustainable packaging space.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you for the invitation here today. And I've got to say there were some great questions in amongst there. And the fact that your 6-year-old daughter is taking the challenge on really shows that everyone from a 6-year-old to a CEO can have an impact here. So what I'd like to do is just briefly go over AusIndustry and the Entrepreneurs Program and what we do and the projects we're looking at for sustainable packaging. So my name, again, is Brett Henderson, Growth Facilitator with the Entrepreneurs Program. And I have the mandate through the Entrepreneurs Program to deliver a number of these services that are on this slide in front of you now. And if you look to the bottom, there's an area called business growth. That is currently our focus on SMEs. They generally have to be eligible revenues between 1.5 million to 100 million, unless you're in Northern Australia, of which it then reduces down to 750,000. We also cover off other areas, including innovation and accelerating commercialisation, and more specialist services to help the needs of those SMEs. I don't need to perhaps tell you about how important the food and beverage sector is, but particularly in regional Australia, it is a big employer. And whilst our projects for sustainable packaging are focused, have a focus, I should say, on sustainable packaging for the food and beverage sector, it does go beyond. We do have companies currently participating that are also manufacturing suppliers as well. So what we did in creating this project is we went out to a number of our stakeholders, and really it came down to about 4 areas in which we focused, of which sustainable packaging is one. And as Kim had highlighted, it's about being proactive here. There was a big trend coming out under circular economy, and sustainable packaging is part of that. These are all of our stakeholders that we work with, and including 2 that you've heard from, including the Institute of Packaging and APCO. So what is the SMART project all about? So it's about taking you from where you are now and helping you on your journey to implement sustainable packaging guidelines into your business, of which there are 10 key guidelines, which I won't get into here today, but they have been covered off in previous sessions. So if you think that you are eligible for this, I'll recommend all the way through that you please do reach out to me, because it is about implementing the things that you need to do to make your practices and your packaging and packaging design more sustainable. So we're looking at running future projects. We currently have dozens of companies from Hobart to Darwin working in this project, and they're making changes. Everything was asked in those questions, working on the communication, using ARLs, and simply just thinking about your packaging for now and into the future, which can be quite a challenge. This entire project that we run generally goes over 12 months, where they're working with an SME, and we're focused on those things that APCO have highlighted and reducing those waste in line with the targets that are set nationally by 2025. I won't click on these case studies and extras resources available, but Kim and the team will be sending these out to you. Please make use of them. There's a good couple of hours of videos there from specialists that will support the webinars, the great webinar series that have been provided to you by DPIRD, and the case studies are case studies from the Australian Institute of Packaging there as well. So as we move forward, we will be hopefully making more offering for sustainable packaging projects into the future. Our biggest strength at the Entrepreneurs Program really is our people. So you would get to work with one of these people for up to 12 months if you choose to come on board, and then able to access up to $20,000 dollar for dollar to help work on those gaps or recommendations that they identify within your business. So in closing, these are my contact details. Please feel free to email me or call me at any stage. And thanks again to the DPIRD team. Thanks, Kim. Over to you.
Thank you, Brett. So I'd just like to finish by asking people if they could complete the survey. As I've said in previous webinars, your feedback's really important to us, both in terms of how we shape our programs and what we offer. And I appreciate the feedback you've provided throughout the series to date. I'd also like to thank the participants, particularly those who've attended the entire series. It's been great to have you on board, and it's been great to have your questions and your feedback in terms of what you'd like to see, and certainly given us a degree of confidence that there's a sufficient level of interest here for the department to facilitate additional resources and additional events in the sustainable packaging space. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for completing the survey. You have the links to the recording, so you're welcome to go back at any stage and review those. Amelia will make sure that there are links to the material that Brett has mentioned, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Thank you, and thanks, team, for all your work.